Welcome back to episode 2 of Out of the Darkness and Into the Light. I'm Sabrina Blackburn, and I'm sitting here with one of my dearest childhood friends, Maggie Anderson. What's up?
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the show. I am really excited about this week's episode. We're going to be delving into some really deep issues. Just to give a little intro to Maggie Anderson, I met her when we were in 3rd and 4th grade, so she's been in my life for like 23 years. God, we're getting old, right? And she's just been through so much. So I'm going to actually just let her kind of tell you her story. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah, thanks. So grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and had a relatively normal childhood growing up. When I was 17, I was in a car accident. We hit black ice. I wasn't wearing my seatbelt, and I got thrown out of the car, and it actually landed on top of me and broke my back. And so I've been in a wheelchair. This December, it'll be 16 years that I've been in a wheelchair. And it has been the craziest ride that I could have ever imagined for myself. Some of the lowest lows, but also some of the greatest highs.
Wow. So, that's just crazy. I prepared so many bullet points that I wanted to cover with you. But we're just going to kind of do a free-for-all here. So I'm going to just kind of start firing some questions at you.
I love it. Let's do this.
Awesome. So one of the things that I love about you so much is that you're so able to be so vulnerable and open with people. And you're just kind of a like, bleh, here I am type of person. You just put all your cards out on the table. I'm exactly the same way. So I get on with you so well. Like, I love it. So I'm going to just try to get as deep as I possibly can. So my biggest question, I was thinking on the way over here, like, what is the biggest question that I have to ask you? And really, the question that I want to ask you is, when you woke up from your accident, like, what was that process? What was it like the moment you woke up and you were told that you were going to be paralyzed? Like, tell me what happened.
Yeah, so it's an interesting experience for me because, and I'm just going to disclaimer, I'm totally going to cry at some point during this podcast.
Me
I
too.
already feel it happening.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember being told. Like, I was so I had so many drugs on board and so many things going on that I didn't remember, like, when I first woke up. And those first couple days in ICU, it was all a blur. I had surgery really early on. I've listened to the stories of my family, and they've told me, like, they just had to tell me over and over again, and I would cry, and then I'd go to sleep, and I'd wake up, excuse me, and then I'd ask again, like, what happened? But for me, the moment that really hit me was when I got to physical rehab. Like, they flighted me from Boise, Idaho back to Salt Lake City, and it was that moment when I was sitting in the rehab unit where I realized I was going to have to start learning how to live my life in a wheelchair. That was the moment that I was just like, I think that was one of the most devastating moments. Like, it rallied me. It literally, that's when my world really came crashing down, and I lost myself.
So you were 17 at the time?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Like, I can't even imagine what that would be like for anybody at any age. But to be in high school and to have that be all of a sudden your reality, like, I can't even imagine. For me, I feel like if that was, like, I don't know. That is such a moment of, like, holy fuckness and truth. Like, all of a sudden it's like, I just can't even imagine. Can you kind of maybe tell us a little bit deeper about, you just kind of covered a little bit about
totally.
that, but what was were you just like in a moment of like, I don't want to do this. I can't do, like, I'm sure you felt so many emotions. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So my background is in mental health. I'm an LCSW. And so I have that human development background. So, right, 17 years old, identity versus role confusion. You're trying to figure out how you fit into the world. When I really look at, so my stepmom was driving, my dad was in the passenger seat, and my little sister, who was 3 at the time, was in the middle of the van. Like, of all the people to break their backs or to get hurt in a way that it was like permanently, like a permanent disability, like, I'm glad it was me because I was in a transition place in my life. My dad had an established career, so did my stepmom, and my little sister, I would never have wished that on her. So for me, it was like, years later, I'm grateful that it was me. And in that moment, I truly didn't see how I could live life in a wheelchair. Like I identified as a walking human being. Like I was a ballroom dancer. I was this, I was that, all these things surrounding my capacity to walk. So the idea of living sitting down, like now when I say it almost feels silly, but I remember in that moment, like I couldn't imagine living my life sitting down. Like it didn't seem like something that I could ever find happiness in or that I could ever settle with.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the next couple of years. Because I'm sure there was obviously some different cycles that you went through, and at various times you were in different points with it. But tell me what that process was like for you over the next couple of years after the accident.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, when I first broke my back, they prescribed me all sorts of medications. So a big piece of that was addiction, right? So I started taking Oxycontin as a way to cope with my physical pain. I still have chronic pain from the injury. But I was on like 18 prescriptions when I got out of the hospital. So like I was on a huge amount of different medications. So over the first 2 years, so I was, 17, senior in high school, graduated high school 6 months after I broke my back, and then moved to California to start physical therapy and go to college. So it was like, even though I broke my back, I still had to keep going. I still chose to keep going in these other areas. So I put on a front, and I did that on the outside, but on the inside, I wanted to kill myself, but I couldn't put my family having to go through that and see me injured. I couldn't put them through killing myself. So I just wouldn't do that. So killing myself wasn't an option. And there was times that I resented the people that loved me because I wouldn't kill myself because of them. I straight up just I hated the people in my life for caring so much about me that I wouldn't kill myself. It was so hard. And so I just put on a front and I did it, and I had my ups and downs. And I think, I was, it would have been September of 2005. So I was injured December of 2003. September of 2005, my brother died of an accidental drug overdose. And he was taking some of the same medications I was. And that was sort of my breaking point. I was partying a lot. I didn't give a shit. I was kind of hell-bent on just not caring about myself. I was smoking Marlboro Red 100s. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it hard, right? And then he died, and I realized that, truly to honor him, I had to get sober. And so I had a friend move in with me who was in a wheelchair at the time, and him and I started dating, and it was so this was then in February of 2006, and so in April of 2006, I got sober. And I remember that moment of I don't know how to be disabled and sober. I had been high on pain pills the whole time. So then to suddenly have to be disabled and cope with it sober was terrifying to me. And, later he said, I was going to leave you if you didn't get sober. Right. So I can definitely see how destructive using substances to try to cope with my pain was. And so I got sober, and then I began to really experience life with a disability. And that experience, it was just this realizing of, okay, so if I'm going to be in a wheelchair the rest of my life, if I can't be happy standing up, if I can't be happy sitting down in a wheelchair, how am I going to be happy standing up? And that was sort of this realization of okay, so I get to grieve who I was and the identity of being an able-bodied individual, and embrace being a disabled woman, embrace being in a wheelchair, because if I couldn't make that a happy experience, then walking wasn't going to fix me.
So, to hear, let's just say, in contrast to somebody else that I might bring on the show that has maybe been through one of these several traumatic experiences that you've had, for instance, losing a brother to addiction, or even addiction itself, just these are huge, massive things to have to endure in the human spirit, and I watched you. I remember when you were in your pain pill phase. I remember seeing you at the drum circle and just the drum circle, right? I remember seeing you and just thinking, she's a fucking mess right now. But how could I blame you? I was like, I could have understood why you would have gone there. For me, if I had gone there, I don't know if I could have pulled myself out of it. I guess we never know until we know who the fuck we are when it's staring us like right in, in the mirror there. But to have gone through so many painful things in your life and to still be this just exuberant, poster girl of everything that you represent, because there's so much to you. You've got so much dynamic. You're so deep and you're so open to learn things about yourself, and it's like you're just constantly transcending reality. And so you've just got this spirit about you, and like it's really interesting that you mentioned that you were glad that it happened to you. Do you sometimes maybe feel like nobody else would have handled it like you? You were the one that was strong enough, like in some weird way, the mystics and the universe and God gave it to you because you were the one that was going to be able to endure all of it.
Absolutely, 100%. Like, the only thing that I would change today if I really could is to manage my chronic pain. Like, I have chronic pain from the injury, and that is the only piece that I have not made peace with in my life, because it's hard to be in pain every day. But everything else, it has taught me so much about life that I wouldn't trade it for anything. I really wouldn't. And each of these events that happened, right, at one point I made a choice. I can be miserable, or I can suck it up and I can make the best out of this life that I have. And I made that choice. And, one time I talked about it to somebody and I was like, it wasn't a choice. Like, there is no choice there. Be miserable or suck it up. And they said, I give yourself a little more credit. It's still a choice. And so, I did. I made that choice to make the best out of it. And that's, to this day, no matter what hits me, every single thing that happens in my life, I have a choice. The elevator has been broken in my building at work forever. And so they're trying to get it fixed. They're doing the best they can. I have a choice. I can be bitter about it and frustrated and angry. Does that fix the elevator? It doesn't. So what do? I smile through it and I deal with it. But there's one small example. It's a choice in life. And so with every experience I have, so I'm sitting down. I still have the power to choose joy, to choose happiness, to choose beauty over being the victim or being miserable or angry or frustrated or bitter. It's just not worth it.
So I feel like our society, and especially in my kind of small recovery community, that these, in the moment when you're going through it and you're still like just right up in the thick of it, it's still happening to you and you haven't moved on from it yet, and you're still grieving, as you say, grieving the loss of whatever you were identifying your life with, be it being a junkie for me, for instance, in that moment, it was like the most epic, huge thing that was happening. Now that I've survived it, it seems so small to me. It's like, oh yeah, people are like, oh gosh, you should be really proud of yourself that you kicked heroin and that you've been clean for a couple of years. And I'm like, that ain't shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting how our perspectives change and how we can minimize things and maximize things and victimize things. And there's just, it's really, this is one of the things I love about you the most, is that we can kind of have these conversations about perspective and actually get down to some pretty deep things. So I'm going to let's kind of move into what are the things specifically that you did to change your paradigm. I mean, you mentioned that you do therapy now. You're a therapist.
Yeah.
I mean, how amazing is that you can actually use what you've been through, the realness and the rawness of it, to turn around and elevate somebody else. I mean, you know fucking firsthand.
Yeah.
I mean, you are literally uniquely qualified for that position. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's also helped you in your own personal journey.
Oh yeah. I would say that choosing to become a therapist was the first serious conscious steps I took towards being healthy within my disability. Like, prior to that, I was happy, but I wasn't necessarily healthy. Like, maladaptive ways of being in relationships. I was super codependent. Like, I had a lot of things going on that weren't healthy. And so I started the master's program in social work, and being exposed to these different topics within the program, you got to look at your own stuff. And how can I be a therapist